The pandemic that shook the world didn't start with COVID-19. There was another far more deadly, the Black Death. Entire cities fell, millions lost their lives, and Europe was changed forever. But what if I told you the impact of this ancient pandemic went far beyond the social and economic collapse? It actually altered our genes? Stay with us as we explore how the Black Death reshaped Europe and left a lasting mark on humanity's very DNA. Let's start by taking a step back in time to the 14th century. By the 1340s, a mysterious illness was already devastating Asia. It was killing millions, moving along the ancient Silk Road trade routes. Then, in 1347, the death ships arrived at Messina, Italy, carrying the deadly disease from Asia to Europe. It was known as the Great Pestilence, but we now know it as the Black Death. Historians believe the bacterium responsible was Yersinia pestis. It spread through fleas that infested black rats, which traveled on ships and caravans across continents. The plague didn't stop at borders. It infected every town, city, and village along the way. But here's something fascinating. Recent studies suggest this deadly bacterium may have existed in Europe much earlier, possibly as far back as 3000 BC. Could this mean Europe had faced outbreaks of the plague long before the infamous pandemic of the 14th century? No one was prepared for what came next. The symptoms were terrifying. Victims of the Black Death would develop painful swellings or buboes in the groin, neck, or underarms, some as large as eggs or apples. These plague boils would ooze pus and blood, and soon after the disease would escalate: fever, chills, vomiting, and within just days, death. The disease spread like wildfire. It was so contagious that people feared even touching the clothes of the infected. Boccaccio, a famous Italian writer, noted how entire families were wiped out, their homes left abandoned as no one dared approach. The dead often lay unburied, their bodies piling up in the streets, as the living were too afraid to tend to them. The numbers were staggering. It's estimated that the Black Death killed 1 in every 3 people in Europe, up to 200 million globally. Entire towns vanished, their populations completely wiped out overnight. Cities that had thrived for centuries became ghost towns. Europe's population took more than a century to recover. But this mass death event didn't just take lives. It reshaped society in profound ways. With so many people gone, there were massive labor shortages. Workers who survived could demand higher wages, shifting the power dynamics between peasants and landowners. Many historians see the Black Death as one of the key events that led to the decline of feudalism and the rise of modern capitalism. One of the most significant yet often overlooked effects of the Black Death was on our genetics. This pandemic triggered what is known as a selective sweep, meaning that natural selection took place on an enormous scale. People with stronger immune systems, particularly those carrying specific immune system genes, were more likely to survive. Those without these genetic advantages didn't live long enough to pass on their genes. This means that the plague essentially pruned the human genome, favoring certain genetic traits that helped individuals fight off infection. The effects of this natural selection are still present in us today, hundreds of years later. Recent studies have identified that certain immune system genes, such as the toll-like receptors or TLR genes, underwent positive selection during the Black Death. These receptors are responsible for identifying and neutralizing pathogens like Yersinia pestis. While these genetic adaptations helped our ancestors survive, they may have unintended consequences today. Populations with heightened immune responses, such as those of European descent, are now more prone to autoimmune diseases. This includes conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. The same immune system genes that once protected against the Black Death now seem to contribute to overactive immune responses in the modern era. This raises fascinating questions about the trade-offs in our genetic evolution. Could the adaptations that saved our ancestors also make us vulnerable in other ways today? The Black Death didn't just reshape Europe socially. It left a lasting genetic legacy. The survivors passed down immune system adaptations that continue to influence how we respond to infections and diseases today. By studying these ancient pandemics, scientists are uncovering valuable insights into the past and present of human health. The Black Death is a reminder that history isn't just a series of events. It is woven into the fabric of who we are today. What other secrets might be hidden in our genes, waiting to be uncovered by the next generation of scientists? Thank you for staying with us through this deep dive into the history and science of the Black Death. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to subscribe for more content, exploring the fascinating intersections of history, pandemics, and genetics. We've got plenty more to share, so stay tuned.